Proverbs 15, verses 17 to 33, there are so many contrasts between the righteous and the wicked, the lazy and the upright, the fool and the wise, those who listen to reproof and those who refuse. And the overall counsel is that wise living is joyful living. In today's reading, you see a lot of notes about joy and gladness and pleasantness, because when we walk in wisdom, we bring joy, not just to ourselves, but to everyone else around us as well. So in verse 17, even if we don't have much to eat and all we have is a plate of vegetables, if there's love in our home, then that's enough. Whereas some people have the finest meals, and yet their home is filled with hatred, which makes even a fatted ox taste terrible. Wisdom allows us the joy of contentment, even when we don't have much, because we have love in our relationships with one another. We also have joy in verse 18 because we're not in conflict with people, because we're not blowing up in rage around them and creating strife. Instead, we're calm and we don't get in nasty disputes with people. We have peace in our relationships, and peace brings joy. Also, our path is easier as wise people in verse 19. When a person is lazy, it's like everything is harder for them, and they've got all these obstacles to overcome, many of them in their own imaginations, but some of them are real, because if you have no discipline, then everything is harder. But a wise person who develops the discipline to do hard things will find that things aren't as hard. And we can have joy in verse 20 of making our parents proud. When we're living right, our mom and dad can have glad hearts, and that gladdens ours. And fools don't understand why we would be glad living wisely, because fools derive their gladness and joy from living in folly. But of course, that joy is only short-lived, because it may be fun to be foolish, at least at first, but eventually it catches up to you. So you may have temporary happiness as a fool, but you don't have lasting joy. Wise people have joy in verse 22 because our plans succeed, because we don't just rush into making decisions without getting input from other wise people in our lives. And so we're not constantly running into walls and barriers because we're doing dumb stuff. That is not conducive to happiness. But when we know our decisions have wise counsel behind them, there's peace in the choices we make. In verse 23, we get joy from bringing joy to others by the words we use. It's a delight to know the right thing to say and to say it at the right time and in the right way, so that we can see people light up because they're built up and encouraged by what we said. And the more wise you become, verse 24, the more joyful life gets. Your path only leads upward to more spiritual success and growth, and the further you get away from the path of death. And there's peace in knowing the longer I live, the more pleasing I am to God, because I'm walking the path of life. And there's great joy in knowing you're right with God, because verse 25, if I'm not right with God, I know the Lord will tear down my house. But even a widow who has nothing, if she's right with the Lord, will be taken care of, because He sets a boundary for her. He gives her a place to live in safety. And when I'm right with God in verse 26, I can have the joy of knowing my words are pleasant to the people around me. People want to be in my presence because my words strengthen our connections and bonds. But if I trouble other people around me and I disadvantage others in order to advantage myself, I'm only bringing trouble down on my own house. There's great joy in verse 28 in knowing we don't just blurt things out, we think about what we're going to say before we say it. And it's so much more helpful and valuable to the people in our lives, and it only strengthens our relationships. I can have the joy in verse 29 of knowing God hears my prayers because I'm trying to live wisely like Him. And wise people have light in their eyes. They're not laden with guilt or regret. They have a confident joy about them, which is contagious, and it gladdens other people's hearts when they look into our eyes. And because we have so much goodness and righteousness in us, because we're not looking at inappropriate things and we're not participating in sin, then only good things come out of us. And so talking to us is like someone receiving good news that gives them hope and vitality. And we can have joy as wise people because even if someone reproves or corrects us, we don't look at that as something negative, we take that and use it to make us even stronger and more wise. Whereas fools who reject correction or discipline are only hurting themselves, and it's going to steal their joy in the long run. Ultimately, the greatest joy of all comes from humbling ourselves before God in reverence and awe, knowing that if we fear Him and keep His wise commandments, it will lead to honor. So the challenge for us is to view Christian living as joyful living. Satan wants to convince us that serving God is a drudgery and he's just a cosmic killjoy. And if you really want to be happy, then you should live for yourself and do what feels good. And of course, it's tempting to believe that because it's easier. It requires discipline to walk the wise path. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 11 says, "All discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful, but sorrowful. Yet to those who have been trained by it, afterwards it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness." So yes, it requires more discipline to walk the wise path and live for Jesus. And in the moment, it may not feel very joyful, but in time, we're going to experience the joyful results of walking in wisdom. When we live for Jesus, it's a guilt-free life. We don't walk around with our heads hung low in shame because we know we're not living right. No, there's a lightness about us, and our eyes are bright, and we have gladness of heart because we know we're at peace with God, we're at peace with our neighbor, and we're not going against the grain of the universe by fighting against wisdom's principles. We're living perfectly in line with the way God designed us to live, and we're not running into walls all the time because we're fighting against our nature and fighting against our Creator. And this points to Christ. It's why He had so much joy. It's why He went around eating and drinking in people's homes and going to weddings. Now, it's true He was also a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Serving God didn't mean He was happy all the time and had a smile on His face every second of the day. But serving His Father gave Him a deep, abiding joy that allowed Him to get through the sorrow. And on the night before His death, He prayed for His disciples, including us today. And He says to God, "Now I am coming to you, and these things I speak in the world, that they may have my joy fulfilled in themselves." Jesus wanted all of us to have the same joy He had, the joy that comes from walking the wise path and pleasing His Father. It's a guilt-free, shame-free, regret-free, turmoil-free, hatred-free, and fear-free path. So as we call on God for wisdom, our prayer today is, "Lord, help me trust that your way is the way to joy. Don't let me fall for Satan's lies, who tells me you're trying to steal my joy. No, all Satan is offering me is temporary happiness, but it's empty and fleeting, and what I want is eternal joy with you." And thank you, God, for laying out the path in your word, for giving us the Proverbs and giving us your Son to show us with clarity and put neon signs along the path to joy so that we wouldn't miss it.